how you like it, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I will be your host, and I am the only we for now. So the whole point of this podcast is I wanted to talk about the first episode of a show. Figured it'd be a great way to kind of go back and see things that, I've already seen and try out some new things without commitment because, who has time to watch, that much TV, like, full-on seasons of shows. So I figured, let me go back and watch something I watched when I was younger. So we're going to talk about That 70s Show, if you couldn't tell by the title. So, first off, came out, apparently, when I looked this up, in 1998, which doesn't sound right to me. It feels like way later than I thought. But then again, I watched it as a teenager, so, I don't know, who's to say. The other thing that struck me about this first episode, or I guess the first thing, we'll say, is that the little title thing or whatever at the bottom says 1976. And I was like, oh, damn. So we're already like in the 70s. Like I could have sworn this started like early 70s, but I'm like, oh, we're closer to the 80s, if anything. So that was just a small thing that caught me off guard. But overall, the episode was like actually funny. Like I would continue to watch more of the show, which I'll get into, obviously. But I feel like everyone in the show was funny. This still has a lot of humor. The one weird thing though is that it's still a product of when shows were doing laugh tracks. So to have that extra like background laughter is really odd because we don't do that nowadays with TV shows. So like with the extra people laughing, I'm like, so I'm laughing at the jokes, but I'm like, is this funnier because this is odd because of the track? Is it funnier because I feel like I should laugh also with the people? Like, am I exaggerating my laughs? Or is this just like a genuine laugh that I'm having? It's really odd. But I did find the show to be fun. The first episode to be funny. And like I said a little bit earlier, I feel like everyone in the show, which I don't remember being that way, but everyone in this episode has at least like one little joke where you're like, huh, like a little, just like little giggles. I wouldn't say it's like laugh out loud TV, but it's definitely funny all around. Now, speaking of the characters, I assume they're all the same age. I don't think the episode really says so, but having Eric be 17, I was like, oh, one, I don't remember that, and two, I think that works if they're all 17, let's say. Even if, I don't know, I think Jackie's supposed to be just a little bit younger, but let's say they're all 17, right? I think that works because it's one of those things where, and I didn't look up the age of the actors, I probably should have done that beforehand, but it's one of those things where it's like, the actors look like they don't look like teenagers, right? They look like, the typical older adult playing a teenager, like, early 20s playing a teenager, but I think it works having them be 17 because that way, it's like, okay, well, they look older because they're about to be adults and head out into life. But I thought it was really interesting to have, like, the first episode be like, oh, no, they're almost out of high school. Like, they're about to be out and about in the world. So I was like, oh, okay, it works. But also I feel like almost like the show is already putting itself in a box where it's like, okay, well, you only have, like, a couple more years of, like, this teenage stuff where you have to get into adulthood. I don't know if that was the plan. Again, I didn't do that much research. I just watched the episode. But speaking of them being teenagers, I think this show really pulls it off. Like having them be like, yo, go upstairs and get some beer. And then I don't know if any other episodes do this, but like having that POV shot of him like walking around and be like, oh, hey, Mrs. Whatever. Like, like trying to like sneak onto the beer and then almost getting caught. But then it happens to work out. It's just like, oh, such a teenage thing, them downstairs smoking weed and they're just kind of like hanging out and like having nothing better to do but then to go to a concert or just like all those small things when you're a teenager and you're like, we can do whatever we want but also we really can't. Like I think it all works very well. And I think another part of this episode that helps with the teenage factor of it all is the part where they're like, oh, like Jackie's like, oh, just call my dad. And then they're like, no. And then they have that reenactment of they having like the adult actors be like, this is what the kids think they would say and how they talk to each other. So I was like, okay, this is really working for me. So again, overall, I think This episode was really funny, and honestly, if I had the time, I would go back and I'd probably watch this whole first season, or at least a couple more episodes. I do wish, going back to the laugh track thing, I'm all over the place. I don't know how rigid you're supposed to be when you talk about TV. But going back to the laugh track thing, right? I feel like, what do I want to say? I almost wish I could watch the show without it. Like, I wish there was an edited version without it, just to see like how funny is the show. Because again, I still think it's funny despite, the added laugh track. But I do wish there was like a different version where I'm like, I wish I could watch this removed, just to see the difference, honestly. The other thing I found weird about this show is, and I assume this is for like commercial breaks and all that, but they have those like 70s, like, I guess like commercial breaks, we'll call them, like 70s commercial breaks. And those I didn't really vibe with. Like, when it was just like flowers or whatever, I was like, all right, cool, I get it, it's the 70s. But I don't know, most of them I was just like, I could go without these. I would also cut these if there was like an edited version, and or if I did or something, I was like, yeah, let's just cut these out. I don't really need it. That being said, still love the theme song. Obviously, it's the first one. Well, I don't know if you've seen the show, person watching, but there's two versions. Eventually, they change it later. So it's interesting to go back to the first one and hear that, because you're always used to like their OG theme song. So if you ever go into a show and then it's like not there yet, you're like, oh yeah, totally forgot it wasn't where it's supposed to be, but it still works. I still enjoyed it a lot. Going back to the characters, because it's all the characters in the car, and you're like, okay, you're kind of like getting the vibe of everyone in that theme song. And I think the show also helps because it's so interesting that everyone already has their roles, and it seems like they already fit into it. It's like, okay, I know, like, Fez is the awkward, like, foreign kid who says funny stuff, but it's also because, like, he doesn't fully understand, like, American things. But we don't really know where he's from, but it doesn't matter, he's foreign. And, like, stuff like that. Like, everyone fits into the roles, and I thought that was really nice. So, overall, it was pretty sporadic. I don't know if I'll be more, have more of a form going on, but whatever. It's the first episode, you know what I mean? So that being said, I figured I should give shows that I watch almost like a ranking, I guess you would say. Maybe that's not the word I'm looking for, but I have 3, right? So it's one and done, which means watch a show, we get in, we get out, right? We don't want to go back to this. Give it a chance, which is like, all right, well, that one was all right, maybe I'll watch another one. And then I'm in, which is self-explanatory, but you're like, yeah, I'd watch more of this show. Now, for that 70 show, first episode, I'm in. Once again, and I said it somewhere in the middle of this, I would 100% keep watching the rest of the season. And honestly, if it kept up the way, like, the vibes and the humor and just, like, the way that this first episode went, I'd watch the first season, and then, again, if it kept like that, I'd probably just watch it again. So, yeah, I'd give it an I'm in on the Leaf ranking scale. Now, I did want to do, for shows I did watch, a spoiler section. So we're now going into the spoiler section. All right. So if you somehow haven't seen that 70s show, I would leave now. Thank you for coming. But I will be getting into spoilers of the rest of the show. Just nothing crazy, just a little bit. So those are going to start in 3, 2. All right. So I actually, again, I said this in the beginning. I watched this as a teenager, and it was one of those things, and hopefully people that listen to this would understand. But like, this was back before Netflix and streaming and all that. So this is like, oh, you had the TV on and you just kind of watched whatever was there. So I remember watching, I think, most of this show. And then this is a small thing. I don't know if everyone's going to remember this. But TV, or specifically cable, used to do this thing where you'd like get to like what feels like the end of the show, and then they would just start over again. And I never looked into why they did that, but that 70s show was definitely one of those where, I got to like the end of the episode, or like the season, or I can't talk. The end of the series. Like, I felt like I was getting to the end of the series, and then it would just start over again. So whatever episodes, or I don't know if I'm even missing a season, like wherever like the ending kind of went to, I never fully finished it. But I remember enjoying it. But it was one of those things of like some shows after like a couple seasons, you're like, not that they're dragging it, but you're like, all right, is this kind of like feeling like we need to, we need to move on from here. And I felt, at least from my memory, which is terrible, that's kind of where the show was going. But again, I haven't seen this since I was a teenager. I'm currently 29, so it's been some time. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna keep it short. Leave it right here. So once again, that 70 show, I'm giving it a I'm in. I'll continue to watch more of this season. If you guys like what you heard, you can give this a rating or a thumbs up wherever you hear it. Just kind of give it some positive. I'm also down with some constructive criticism. Let me know what you want to hear, what you like, what you didn't like. I'm always looking to grow. So yeah, this is it for the first episode of the We Don't Know TV podcast. I thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.